A suburban Chicago high school is now granting unrestricted locker room access to transgender individuals. The issue of trans people in schools is very contentious. There are lawsuits against teachers who refuse to say certain pronouns. I have that story actually here from time.com. And there have been instances in the UK now being reported that girls are risking infection and they're skipping school altogether because they don't want to share bathrooms with males. It is a complicated problem. But in the end, this story I find particularly interesting because my general understanding is that at this school or in this district, they had what's called privacy stalls. For me personally, if I'm in a locker room, I want to be in the privacy stall. Like, here's the thing. When you're in the bathroom, you're in a particularly vulnerable space. A lot of people don't seem to care. A lot of guys are comfortable. A lot of women are comfortable. But a lot of people are uncomfortable. You have the joke trope, like I think American Dad did this joke where the CIA director was in a stall and he put toilet paper over the edges of the stall and he called them his privacy strips. Yeah, a lot of people want privacy. I think one of the big solutions to transgender access to locker rooms is simple single-use stalls, right? You have your own room you go into. So when we talk about the issue of access for trans people in bathrooms, all of this is solved when new buildings institute a simple, single, private room. Makes sense, right? Okay, well, you'd think that if you even had the left-wing website Upworthy saying, girls hold in peace, skip school, so they won't have to share gender-neutral bathrooms with boys. Okay, you got to understand what Upworthy is. It was founded by the guy from Move On. Okay, Eli Parser, I think his name. It is a left-wing clickbait site saying girls are skipping school, they're risking infection for this. You'd think if that was apparent, we can all agree. Simply, check this out, look at this photo. Men's room, thumbs down. Women's room, thumbs down. Family restroom, thumbs up. I agree. I would rather use a private room, right? That brings me to this story. District 211 grants transgender students unrestricted locker room access. Now, I want to make a few important points. For one, it is a complete mischaracterization that trans people are somehow going to endanger somebody or there's going to be harassers or, that's a trope and that is unfair. I think it's possible that people exploit the system, but people can exploit every system. The real issue that I see here is not that this trans individual is going to go and hurt anybody or is going to create any risk, but that you have women who are uncomfortable and risking their safety because they're scared. This is the challenge. Do we open up a space for a group of individuals that could put a larger group of individuals in fear of harm, even if that harm is unfounded? Gotta say, it's very complicated. It is unfair to assume that someone will cause you harm, but there's also issues of people just wanting privacy. So here's the thing. I'm not gonna, I don't want to play games of who should be allowed to do what or whatever. I will just say, let me read this because this gets to the heart of the issue. While I said, I think privacy, having your own privacy makes sense. That's what they're fighting against. Like they were granted privacy stalls. They were told they had to use them and they voted against removing that requirement. I guess it's a challenge, isn't it? Should someone be required to use a privacy stall or should they be allowed to walk around the women's locker room as they see fit because they identify as such? Let's read a little bit of the story. This is from the Daily Herald. They say, after addressing the controversial issue of transgender students' access to locker rooms in a few different ways over the past 4 years, Palatine-Schaumburg High School District 211 board members Thursday voted 5-2 to lift a requirement that those students use privacy stalls. They go on to mention some local I don't want to read into the local politics. They say, while privacy stalls have been made available for all students in locker rooms at the district's 5 high schools, only transgender students have been required to use them. But when second semester classes begin after the holidays, no such rule will be in effect. Now, we got a complicated problem here. Requiring someone to use the privacy stall. Yeah, I don't know about that. Can you really tell someone this is what they have to use? I guess technically the answer is yes. This school is saying transgender individuals will not be allowed to just use whatever the bathroom they want unless they're registered with the school and they have their student ID and their identity reflects, like, you have to go through a process. What they're saying is you can't just go into the school and claim to be whatever gender identity and then use whatever bathroom. Okay, well, now you've got a problem. The school is saying they can regulate who is or isn't allowed to use which bathroom, but now they're saying they can't regulate who is or isn't allowed to use particular formats of the bathroom. I think the problem we have here is, for one, I'm going to say it, and people are going to get angry about it, but I think in the future we're going to have co-ed bathrooms. I really, really do. That's what we're seeing in the UK, especially locker rooms. And the bigger debate is not over bathrooms, it's over locker rooms. I think that's the case because the laws that are being passed straight up say you can't discriminate, period. So here's the problem I see. It's a fact that the perpetrators of violent crime tend to be men. Sorry, guys, that's true, okay? Men are more likely to be the victims of violent crime. Men are more likely to be the perpetrators of violent crime. And women are more likely to face harassment and abuse from men. The problem we have now is that women feel particularly vulnerable and want a private, intimate space. Biological females, I should say. And I can respect that. Trans women and men also want the same things, and I can respect that too. The problem is that for the average female, they recognize the difference between a female and male regardless of if they're trans. The bigger challenge then arises because it's not a conservative versus liberal issue. There are feminists and left-wing individuals who oppose these kinds of policies because they think females should have a protected space. The question then becomes, who is deserving of a safe space? Should we create a female safe space, or do we create an identity safe space? Because then what happens then when those females don't feel safe? I'll tell you exactly what happens. So I'm not going to read too much into this story from District 211 because it's really, really into the weeds of local politics. They talk about access to locker rooms, complaints, and the individuals and how they voted. We don't need to learn about Schaumburg, Palatine. But we do need to see this story, that girls are risking infection due to anxiety of sharing bathrooms with boys. Now, this isn't so much about transgender individuals using bathrooms, but it is about how women or females feel in these spaces. Transgender individuals make up a very, very small portion of the world. The number has been increasing, and there's a lot of reasons for that. On the right, people believe it has to do with rapid onset gender dysphoria, for the most part, not everybody. This idea that it's a social trend. On the left, they believe it's because it's more socially accepted. People are less scared, to come out and be comfortable with who they are. And I think it's fair to say the truth is closer to the middle, right? There are probably instances where young people think it's trendy and, adopt certain clothing styles and identities. But it's probably true that a lot of people used to be too scared and didn't want to risk coming out of fear of violence and harm and discrimination. So it is a complicated problem that I think everybody can kind of see a little bit of, but people are too tribalistic. So here's what ends up happening. People don't think about the consequences of what we get from this. First, in the UK, it was reported that assault against women has gone up with gender-neutral locker rooms. This is not transgender individuals harming people. I believe it's absolutely important to clarify that this idea that a trans person is going to hurt a woman, it's ridiculous. There have been crazy people, and there are people who exploit laws. It doesn't matter what the law is, it will be exploited. So could there be a dude who puts on a wig and exploits the law? Sure, but he could do that anyway. Somebody who wants to commit a crime is going to commit a crime. You take a look at gun rights advocates, they say, someone who wants to get a gun will figure it out. Yeah, somebody who wants to go into a woman's bathroom to assault a woman is going to figure it out. I'm not super concerned about that. But the problem arises based on the aftermath of what these laws produce. So first, I do find it weird that, I don't know if it's fair to require someone to use a privacy stall, but I don't really see why that's a big issue. Why not? I would prefer it. I'd be like, yeah, cool, I'm down. And I think I may have said this earlier. The school says you have to be registered with your identity or whatever. They have to know for sure that this is how you identify you're trans. How can you regulate what bathroom someone can use, but then concede you can't regulate what bathroom they can use? It's simultaneously not really making sense. But here's the bigger problem. First, I always want to say this. Protecting the individual rights and liberties of people is paramount. And as someone who believes in freedom very much so, and stopping the government from imposing their will on individuals, I believe that's something we should be striving for. So the challenge becomes, how do you protect the rights of a trans person who should be free to live, who should be allowed to live free from discrimination, to be allowed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while also guaranteeing the safe space and protections females are asking for? The left would tell you that it's, or not all of the left, because admittedly, you've got feminists who oppose this, but many on the left would say, it's an issue of you being a bigot, a transphobe, and all that stuff. And I put it very simply, like, females want to know that they're going to have a space where they can be free from males, especially when it comes to intimate business, like, periods, for instance. And that's what this Upworthy story brings up. The funny thing about this Upworthy story is that it blames the patriarchy, and they basically end by saying women should get over it. Like, I kid you not. No, listen. Here's where the big problem arises. Perhaps you could argue that females should get over it, right? Basically, their conclusion is, look, they go through all of this stuff about, women are embarrassed. There's a taboo and a stigma around menstruation, and that in the end, they basically say it's the problem of the patriarchy. Here's what they say. They say something like, it must be noted that girls' fears do not arise from the gender-neutral bathrooms themselves, but rather the sexist patriarchal culture that they and their boy counterparts are raised in. If we raised our children to be period positive and took an objective and scientific approach to education, girls would be less likely to experience negative emotions related to periods or using the same washroom as their male peers. Changing this culture would also mean building a more inclusive LGBTQIAP+ positive environment on school campuses. However, addressing culture is a slow and tedious process, which cannot be done through easy fixes like implementing gender-neutral bathrooms. They're only one step forward that must be accompanied by several other measures to address our toxic heteropatriarchy, including teaching boys how to unlearn misogyny. Wow. This is the paradox of what they're proposing. You can't simultaneously be feminist, but then vote for removing female protections. You cannot do this. I understand that the trans community is a relatively small community, and they're deserving of they should be free from discrimination. Here's the challenge. First, we can solve all of these problems with single stalls. For the most part, like in New York, most new buildings will just have a bathroom. They'll have 2 bathrooms, and they won't even put male or female on them. They'll just put bathroom, right? Or they'll put, that one joke is whatever, just wash your hands. That's easy to do when you walk into a room and close the door behind you and lock it, and you're in a room by yourself. I think everybody prefers that. And of course, you can say that's a gender neutral bathroom. A lot of people like to talk about how gender neutral bathrooms have emerged and that this is like, see, it works just fine. No. What you're talking about are privacy stalls, which brings me back to that first story. They removed that restriction. So again, I don't know if you can force someone to have to use one, but wouldn't that solve the problem? Here's where the big problem emerges. In the UK, there was a story about how after these laws were passed saying you can't discriminate, locker rooms became gender neutral, meaning all males and all females were just walking into whichever one. It wasn't because they were scuttled to the right direction. There was no longer a woman or a male. It was just 2 locker rooms, gender neutral. That's the law. What people don't seem to realize is that when you pass a law, the intended consequence may not be what actually happens. That's not how the system works. You got to think really far in advance. What did we see in the UK? An increase in sexual assaults. Like that happened, okay? I'm sorry. I'm not saying that to be mean. It happened. It was reported by The Independent, a left-wing news organization, or left-leaning. They showed that when the laws were passed, it wasn't like an instant thing where all of a sudden they said, we're going to create a new locker room, a separate one for gender-neutral individuals, and women will still visit. No. They said locker rooms are now co-ed. And that meant because men are more likely to commit violence against men and women, you will now put males, some of whom are aggressive, violent individuals, along with females who are less likely to be so. Now, I know, women can be violent, women can abuse men. That's a fact. I'm saying that men are more likely to be, and again, sorry dudes, that's true. And I think most guys realize this, and that's why they want to protect women. I guess maybe the more right-wing guys, male feminists are kind of like, you're strong, you go do your thing. I'm trying not to stereotype. But anyway, in the end, you had an increase in sexual assaults against women simply because male predators, now it was a lot easier. So I will stress this point. Somebody who wants to break the law will do it. Okay? It is absurd to think that a trans person is going to commit a violent act against somebody or that somebody would need to pretend to be trans to go into the women's bathroom. Let's be real. If a male predator wants to abuse a woman, I don't think he cares about the thing on the door that says woman is going to go, oh no, I can't go in unless I put on a wig. No, he's going to kick the door in and go be a violent monster because they're breaking the law, right? It's a similar argument to gun rights. I may have said this already, but if somebody, you want to ban weapons, somebody's going to find a way to go get one. They're going to break the law because criminals break the law. So I think, the bigger issue is the result of these laws. They're not going to play out necessarily the way you think they are. In this instance, here's the other ramification. In the UK, they said, okay, we're going gender neutral. We're going to respect the rights of all individuals. They ended up taking away protections from women. Let's be real. Identity politics is complicated. It's not always good and it's not always bad. The authoritarian application of identity politics is bad. That's typically what I'm trying to call out. General social justice, or just justice, and the removal of discrimination, the protection of rights, is a good thing. Here's the problem. We create spaces for certain individuals to protect them in some circumstances. It is not discrimination if we say we've created a handicapped entrance. Think about it this way. Imagine if there was, you ever see a staircase, and on the side is a small elevator for people who are in wheelchairs or have trouble going upstairs. It would not be discrimination, in my opinion, to ask someone who is able-bodied not to use that, right? Like a strapping young lad of 20 years old is standing at a staircase of 5 steps, and he says, no, I want to use the elevator. And you say, well, could you not? Because it's for people who are, who need it. And then he says, that's discrimination. You can't discriminate against me. And imagine that person then sues, and the state would have to be like, that's true. You can't tell someone based on capability whether or not they're allowed to use the little mini elevator. No, that's ridiculous. The elevator is for people who need it. Female bathrooms are for people who are more likely to be the victims of sexual crimes, are more likely to be victimized by males. That's why we create a space. Same thing in sports. Female leagues are created because women are less they on average have lower bone density, less muscle mass. And this is for the top of the bell curve, okay? There are substantially more, there's substantially more men who can run, say it's like a 6-minute mile, I guess. The point I'm trying to make is, while female athletes are the cream of the crop, the top of the top, and the best of the best for women, you are more likely to find a guy who isn't the best who can beat them. So we create a space where women can compete against women, females. To then say a biological male, for whatever reason, can enter that space is taking away a civil rights protection. It's like, we want to prevent discrimination based on, gender and all these things and sex and all that. So we've created women's sports. This brings me to the big conundrum. Now, I know the lead story. You get the point. Why would they not want to use the privacy stall? But now we have the issue where, for one, a lot of trans activists say that trans athletes have to, adhere to a certain testosterone. That's not true. The law doesn't say that. You need to think about what the law says and think 10, 20 years down the line. What will we get? Well, now we're seeing at some local high schools, I believe this in Connecticut, 2 trans women who are not on hormones, who have simply just said that they identify as such, have shattered women's track records and are now, potentially going to get some scholarships. The young women who are displaced by this are suing for discrimination. This is the challenge. I am not here to advocate for or against anything, but to tell you that you now have 2 people of 2 different identities suing, claiming discrimination. Now, they're not both obviously suing, but in the school, you have this person saying we should be allowed access. In the track, you have the women saying they have an advantage and you're discriminating against our opportunities. So which is it? Who wins out? I honestly don't know. But I'll tell you what, if we don't talk about it, we don't solve the problem. The one thing I think everyone needs to think about when it comes to this debate is not whether or not, I'll put it this way. Think about what laws you're implementing. Think about what comes next, because people don't seem to be doing that. I do not believe it is fair to expect all of these girls to skip school because they don't want to share a space with a male, because you want one individual or a small group of people to be able to use that space. I think the solution is we probably need prisons that are for trans people. We probably need leagues that are for trans people. And we probably need private single-use bathrooms like this image shows, right? I don't necessarily know what Science and Sorcery is trying to say. They wrote, I suppose this was inevitable. I made a video about using public bathrooms as a trans, non-binary, gender, non-conforming person. I don't know what their ultimate conclusion is, but at least the general message here makes sense. You're not going to use the men's room. It's a large, open, public space. You're not going to use the women's, but the family restroom is just one space for you. That makes sense. That's something we should think about. The other issue now that I'll end with, because I don't want to make this too long, is a much bigger challenge. This is a story from time.com. This isn't just about a pronoun. Teachers and trans students are clashing over whose rights come first. Do you have a right to compel someone to say something? The best analogy I could see to a situation like this is the baker in Colorado who won. A gay couple wanted a wedding cake. He said, essentially, any cake you want is yours, but I will not write a message. I will not speak. The difference here for me is that he wasn't being told to frequently work in a space where he had to keep saying this thing over and over again. Although there are many people now suing him. Somebody wanted like a gender affirmation cake where like you cut it open and it's a different color or something. And he refused to do that too, I believe. The challenge is government compelled speech is not a right, in my opinion. This is a big fight. Now, I think the left doesn't understand the scope of the gender and of the gay wedding cake. They think it was simply a baker saying, get out, I refuse. No, he was saying, I'll make you cake. I'm just not going to say what you want me to say. For me, I fall on the side of drawing something with icing. You could have someone else do that. You don't have to do that, right? You could have one of your staff say, you write it down, I'm not going to do it. And so that one is a real challenge. Ultimately, the baker won, so we'll leave it there. This is different. This is a student telling a teacher, you must say these words. Apparently, there was one case where a teacher said, I'll just call you your name, and that wasn't good enough. They said, no, use the pronouns. I wouldn't, you're never going to make me do anything, man. The government could come and tell me I have to do, like, say certain things. It's never going to happen, right? I understand there are many things I just let the government do. Like, I pay taxes, I got no problem, right? And there are probably people who say, like, I refuse. This is, for me, a red line. How can you tell someone they must say a thing? This is a school, right? And so who's in the right? I got to admit, I do not believe a public institution has a right to compel speech, period. We have a First Amendment. You can't, there can be no law infringing someone's right to speech. So how can one student at a school demand it? The law doesn't protect you from other people saying things you don't want to hear. There's no hate speech laws. Therefore, in my opinion, they could call you whatever name they want. Now, here's the bigger problem. You could also be fired for saying things the administration doesn't want you to say. This is a big challenge, right? Imagine if a teacher started using racial slurs. They'd probably be fired, and who would disagree? But what if they sued on free speech grounds saying a public institution cannot restrict their speech? We got challenges here, man. But in the end, I'll leave it there. I don't want to make this too long. All I say is, look, we got to think about the results of what these laws are. And I absolutely will personally question why it is that somebody would sue when they were privacy stalls. Is it because there weren't enough? I honestly don't know. But we got problems, man. Imagine you have now like a black individual who's advocating for like Harvard's black-only graduation ceremony, and then a white person sues saying it's racial discrimination. They would probably win. What line, and who we protect? For the left, it usually falls onto the marginalized group, and because trans people are in the minority, they are they win out. I don't think that's fair, though. I'll leave it there. The school did it. It's happening. Some people say the end of gender segregation. They compare it to like civil rights. That may be what's coming in the future, whether you want it or not. But we can look at what happens, at least for now. Is it possible that Upworthy is correct, and in the future, young women will learn to get over the stigma because boys will be taught to be not misogynists, I guess? I honestly don't think so. I don't think so. 98.6% of people or so are discernibly and identify as, cishet. That's what they call it. Cisgendered heteronormative individuals. Like, your completely overwhelming majority in the 98th percentile are either male or female, identify as such, and are heterosexual. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I really doubt we're going to see people be, this might be, I don't know. I don't know how this will handle. I'll tell you, I'll add one more thing. Look, somebody described this on Twitter saying that when it came to like gay marriage and stuff, that's something you do in the privacy of your home and your events. You want to go to have a wedding. I don't got to be there. I don't care what you do. The difference here is you're talking about females and males who are now being told in public spaces in what you want in your privacy that there will be that big change. And I got to admit, it is complicated. But I will say this. the way things are going, there are two possible outcomes, and I'm not quite sure what the future will hold. It's possible, due to the consistent trends towards the left, this results in a future where there is just co-ed locker rooms and bathrooms. But based on family replacement rates, like liberals and conservatives having kids, and based on the trends of Generation Z being slightly more conservative than millennials in some areas, bucking the trend of the past 100 years, and conservatives having more kids, it's possible that this swings in the other direction and we start going way more conservative. I'll wrap it up, though. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all there.